Your oral health is influenced by metaphysical factors such as your emotional state now and in the past, including your family history, your ancestors' traumas, and perhaps even past lives, your parents' circumstances and emotions during your gestation, infancy, and childhood, your adverse childhood experiences, trauma, or attachment-based hurts, your attitudes and your beliefs, where you live, when you've moved and how you've traveled, your stress levels, your hopes and your aspirations, what you do every day, the people who talk to you and the people you live with, what you're angry about and what frustrates you, your disappointment and grief, your fears and anxiety, the secrets that you keep, what you put up with, and what you don't do or say. That is a snippet from The Secret Lives of Teeth, Understanding Emotional Influences on Oral Health, a book written by Meliors, who I'm thrilled to introduce you to in this episode. I'd never really given much thought to my relationship with dentistry until I had a near fatal complication with a routine oral surgery in 2015. Even though I had pretty much every baby tooth and even a few adult molars surgically extracted, I had a lovely dentist. He was cheerful, and I never felt anxious in his chair or traumatized by any of his procedures, or so I thought. Throughout the entirety of my childhood and up until I was approximately 33, I was highly dissociated from my body, which afforded me an incredibly high threshold for pain. Now, as I become more aware of how trauma, both experienced and inherited, is stored in the body, I'm now able to observe how many of my dental procedures were a byproduct of the emotional debris I was carrying in my mouth, and not necessarily a physical or biological issue that required surgical intervention. And it was also through my post-op healing journey of 2015 that I first became aware of my energetic and emotional body, when it was a chiropractor who worked on my central nervous system who helped me unlock my masseter muscle that was damaged during the severe infection that I incurred during this oral surgery, and not the actual oral surgeons. In an industry with what I believe to be an abnormally high ratio of traumatized patients, paired with increased and undeniable burnout rates among doctors, there is an enormous opportunity to transform dentistry into a truly healing experience for both the patient and practitioner. Most body practitioners who work with the energetic field know how to protect, cleanse, and care for their etheric body, so they not only don't carry and take on the emotional weight of those they work on, but also so they don't transfer it across clients. Energy transference between doctors and patient is real. What if dentists could learn how to tap into how they're feeling when they're working on patients, and learn how to observe, not absorb, the thoughts, feelings, sensations that arise in their own body as potentially a reflection of what the person in their chair is experiencing? Or if they began approaching each patient with an understanding of the emotional and ancestral archetypes of the teeth, which meridians and therefore organs they're connected to, and begin to observe patterns that are appearing across patients from a place of knowing that you don't attract what you want, you attract who you are, meaning everyone who shows up in your chair is there to reveal something to you and unlock another layer of your own personal awareness, cultivating an understanding of the patient as a whole instead of just what's occurring inside of their mouth. This kind of transpersonal, inside-out approach to dentistry, for me, is what creates a truly holistic dental practice that extends beyond ozone therapy and the removal of amalgams and encompasses the entire mind, body, and spirit. I see a world where the cultivation of radical self-accountability and responsibility transforms the way we care for ourselves, and therefore breeds the unshakable self-trust that births a new paradigm of medicine into being. This way of being is well within our grasp, and it's people like Meliors who are the lighthouses guiding both doctors and patients into the awareness that makes this reality not just possible, but absolutely probable. Meliors Sims is the Holistic Tooth Fairy, a natural oral health coach who has worked with hundreds of clients worldwide to avoid unnecessary dental procedures and have better experiences with the necessary ones. She lives in Raglan, New Zealand, and after a diverse career from research to counseling to arts, and a lifetime of terrible teeth, she stumbled on an alt-oral approach which prevented what would have been her 7th root canal. That experience inspired years of independent research and experimentation, eventually resulting in her uniquely holistic approach to oral health delivered through online coaching. Meliors' new book, The Secret Life of Teeth: Understanding Emotional Influences on Oral Health, is a comprehensive guide to healing teeth and gums with a metaphysical perspective. I am beyond thrilled to introduce you today to Meliors. As always, these episodes are typically cultivated through my own personal experience and curiosity as I unlayer and navigate through my own journey. And I promise this episode is going to be full of knowledge and wisdom that you never knew you needed, but will be so happy that you found. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Grand Rising Experience wherever you are listening. It truly helps to ensure that these nuggets of wisdom and wild unicorns find those who need to hear them. You can also subscribe at NicoleConnor.com to learn more about my private membership, The Portal, and any upcoming summits you can attend both virtually or in person. As always, thank you so much for being here. I love you. Let's dive in. And I have to say, I don't think I've looked in my mouth or touched my teeth more than I did reading your book.
That was the idea.
It was quite like a multi-sensory experience, and I loved it. I really appreciate the way that you have articulated your journey through your own process of coming to being the holistic tooth fairy, but also how you broke the book down into the various sections where I feel like, okay, I'm being given like an introductory explanation, and now you're actually going to map out the mouth for me. And now you're going to give me the tools to know how to move forward. And it was beautifully done and so well articulated. And there is absolutely nothing like it on the market right now.
Wow, thank you very much. That's really good to hear. That was my intention. So I'm glad it's landed that way.
How did you come to be the holistic tooth fairy?
So I had terrible teeth for most of my adult life, starting with a really traumatic root canal when I was 17. And 6 root canals later, I finally realized that just doing what dentists told me to do and brushing and flossing consistently and trying to eat healthy and going to the dentist every 6 months wasn't actually stopping me from having constant decay and needing fillings and crowns and root canals and I started looking for an alternative approach, which was really strange because I was very into alternative health for the rest of my body. I got into kind of herbal healing and kind of Wiccan approaches to health and so on in my teens, but never thought of applying that to my teeth until I hit my 40s. And so I don't know, that was about 12 or 13 years ago. I sort of had an eye-opening epiphany in the dental chair that I just can't go on kind of just being the good little dental patient and doing what I'm told. I need something more. And what I found was a nutritional approach to healing cavities, which worked really well for me. And I was able to prevent what would have been my 7th root canal. And never really looked back. So really reduced the amount of dental intervention that I needed, started having a much more positive experience of going to the dentist, where it would just be a checkup and being told, it's fine, you're in good shape, which I had never heard about my teeth before. And so I was so thrilled with how well everything was going. I kept wanting to learn more about oral health, and because I'm the kind of person that likes to talk about what I'm obsessed with at any particular time, all my friends and family got to hear about it too, and people started asking me for advice. I got asked to write an article for a national magazine, and I thought, well, maybe there's something in this, and I should figure out a way to turn this into my work. And so on my 50th birthday, I downloaded the idea of becoming a natural oral health coach, the name, the Holistic Tooth Fairy, the whole business plan and every step along the way that I followed for the last 7 and something years. And here I am, the Holistic Tooth Fairy, a natural oral health coach, and now the author of a book called The Secret Lives of Teeth, Understanding Emotional Influences on Oral Health.
I love it. And I think it's so beautiful that you pulled from your own experience. And I think that's so important. And that is something that's missing a lot in the traditional coaching landscape, is that people are very quick to get certified to coach, but they're not necessarily doing it from a place of experience and deep knowing. And you used a lifetime of experience in order to be able to cultivate and curate this tome of wisdom that you've put together, which, as I said, I couldn't stop touching my teeth, whether I was running my tongue along my teeth, or I was using my fingers, or I was pulling out a mirror. I was obsessed with what was happening in my mouth as I was reading through the book, because it really does take on like the physical, the metaphysical, the spiritual, the emotional, and it truly is a holistic approach to your mouth. And yes, people have probably heard of holistic dentistry. And when I've researched holistic dentists and I've looked into them for myself, a lot of them, they're doing the ozone therapy or they're removing the amalgams, but there's still that metaphysical and emotional aspect that's missing in a profession that is rife with trauma. And I think that that is such an important component to what you're bringing to the conversation.
Yeah, almost everyone that I work with to support them with their teeth and gums has got trauma, often trauma that has happened in a dental office, but just as often trauma that's happened elsewhere in their life that has some aspect to it that is very activated by the experience of being in a dental chair. There's something about when we lie back on that chair and we're tipped back and we're belly up and we open our mouths, and then this tall adult looming over us comes in with sharp instruments onto our tender, vulnerable underbelly that really activates a kind of mammal basic instinct of submission and vulnerability and kind of the freeze response. And we go really passive in that situation. And there's this whole dynamic between dentists being all-knowing, all-powerful, holding the secrets of our mouths, and us just taking it, lying back in the dental chair, that really misses out that importance of what we know about our own teeth and gums, we know about our own bodies, that we are not given any opportunity to access or make sense of or value, because the dentists, and they don't know either. They've got no idea. They're working in this very surgical model. They're dental surgeons. That's the degree that they do, is dental surgery. So when you are a surgeon, you cut and you open up and you stitch things back together. And that's the only way, that the perspective that most of them are able to look at teeth and gums, and it's just missing so much on both the physical needs of teeth and gums and mostly on the metaphysical.
Honestly, growing up, the only thing I really knew about my teeth is that they were in my mouth and I could chew at them. We don't really learn about the teeth. So what's your definition of a tooth?
Well, it's the most hard, dense, solid material in the body. And as such, energetically, it's kind of like a magnet for emotional, suppressed emotions. So when we feel something and it's not safe, or we think it's not safe to express it with our voices, it kind of gets stuck in the mouth. And the teeth have this dense quality that energetically will hold on to what we cannot say. And that's fundamentally, if I had to give you a one-line kind of explanation of the metaphysical impact on teeth, it's like what you don't say. It's secrets, silences, and suppressed emotion.
Now, I know that you have gone to great lengths to research and that you've had to look to different languages in order to be able to kind of distill and pull apart all of the knowledge that you've put in there. And from the works of the other doctors that you've pulled from, you've also been able to come up with your own archetype for the mouth, and every single tooth has its own archetype. And I know when I was going through it, the reason I found you in the first place is because I had a traumatic wisdom teeth extraction that almost resulted in like a near-death experience. And when I started looking into the archetype of the tooth, for me, it was on the lower left jaw. And I look at the archetype of that particular tooth, and then I have two teeth in the front that are kind of crooked on my front right side. It's all very similar. It's all about suppression of speech and playing small and having to kind of bite your tongue and hold your words. So I thought it was really interesting to see how, just in my own mouth, how the archetypes were all completely related to one another and have created this little emotional reflection that the outside world can see. And I had no idea that they were even interconnected.
Yeah, I think that's the part that I felt so strongly that I wanted to share with the world, because it's not information that's ever been written down, certainly not in the English language. There's people in Europe, dentists in Europe, that have kind of done elements of this who I've drawn into my system. But basically that tooth archetype system assigns a personality or a character to each individual adult tooth, and it incorporates the relationships, the experiences, the environments, or the emotions that can activate symptoms in that tooth. And so it enables you to kind of start telling a story that is so fundamental to the way human brains work, that's so healing and empowering, when you can tell a story about what's going on in your mouth that isn't just, oh, I've got decay and I need a filling, but this is related to, my grandmother, if it's one of your wisdom teeth, if you're a left wisdom tooth, or that cultural heritage influences the wisdom teeth, or in the front teeth, your own personal family dynamics when you were a baby or a small child, the relationship you had with probably your father or a father figure, if it's that front right teeth. And so you start to be able to fit the experiences that you're having as physical symptoms into the story that you tell of your life, and at the same time get a much deeper understanding of that story you tell of your life. And so you're not only enabling the healing of teeth through the release of those suppressed emotions and stories that got stuck in the teeth, breaking those silences, telling those secrets, but you're also at the same time healing your whole life. It has this much bigger, wider impact to come at the places where you're stuck and struggling in your life, whether that's work or relationships or creativity, come at it from the angle of, well, this is the tooth that is trying to get my attention. This gives me a different perspective on these bigger issues. It all opens up and loosens up in a new way.
Yeah, and that's what I found so fascinating about your work, because when I started my own healing journey in 2017, unrelated to my mouth, but actually completely related to my mouth, because this was almost like a spiritual awakening that had been kind of kickstarted. I was fascinated with body mapping. So it was, how do I use my physical body to and the physical pain in my body to start unlocking my emotional story, and where, kind of I was disconnected, I would say, from the actual emotion. But it never occurred to me to look at my mouth, even though I knew that my mouth was telling me a story because of the source of the infection and how everything had started with this wisdom teeth extraction. And I think it's because there just wasn't, or at that time, I was not finding the information that really connected it. So, how long did it take you to kind of map the archetypes?
Well, it started when I started coaching. One of my very first clients sort of told me about the mouth meridians. I had somehow missed that completely in all my personal research up until that point. And while it was a bit embarrassing to have a client, kind of school me, I really needed it at that stage. I've learned so much over these years of coaching. I've learned as much from my clients as any of them have ever learned from me. But yeah, so that was it. I started with the meridian system from traditional Chinese medicine and how that applies to the mouth. And that was interesting and useful and also limited. And then I was working with clients. Quite a number of my clients were coming from backgrounds where they were used to working with like internal family systems or parts work, where they would meet with different parts of their psyche or their story or their inner child or their ancestors. And we would collaboratively figure out the connections with the teeth. And so it was very much an experiential process and a theory that has emerged from practice of talking with hundreds of people about the metaphysical meanings of their teeth from each person's unique story, unique experience. I started to see these themes and patterns. And then I discovered these European dentists who were doing some work in this area, and reading kind of Google Translate versions of French and Spanish and Italian books to try and see what other people had found out. And there were elements there that I could bring in that started to flesh out what I was doing with my clients. And then it was the process of writing the book. Like, I was writing the book and I was like, how am I going to talk about these meanings of these teeth? Do I do it this way? Do I do it that way? Writing this version, writing that version. And then one day it was just like, oh, it's archetypes. That's what it is. And I think it's because I do a lot of work with tarot cards and oracle cards, readings for myself, and I do readings with clients and on Insight Timer for big group kind of fast readings with people. I think the cards kind of help me to understand the archetype relationship. Yeah.
Archetypes are very helpful to allow people to kind of build like a relationship with a certain sense of knowing that they have. I'm curious to know, and speaking of the word curious, I love that you came to these conclusions just through simply following your curiosity. And I think it's really important that we do that. And that's something I'm very passionate about people cultivating, is just sheer curiosity and throwing kind of just throw logic to the wind sometimes, and really just allow yourself, regardless of how crazy something might seem, to just follow your curiosity and don't necessarily stick to just institutional knowledge, because a lot of what's being created right now is being pulled from the ether. And as you said, like the holistic tooth fairy just kind of, it was a download for you. So again, this information, I think, also divinely guided as and when you needed it to come to you, and it did. But out of curiosity, because I know you're in New Zealand and you have clients right around the world, did you notice any patterns with specific teeth based on culture or age or background, where maybe there might be an issue with one specific tooth, maybe in one part of the world versus another?
No, I think it's pretty universal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed some differences in the way the story gets told between people who identify as women versus people who identify as men. That's something that I've observed. But yeah, it never ceases to amaze me that I can be talking to someone in Catalonia or in Scotland or in Michigan or Australia, and they will, they'll have their own unique story, but the archetype, we can extract the kind of essence of that story, and the archetype matches the tooth, and it's the same tooth for all of them. One thing I do notice is that particularly with wisdom teeth, I will often see a number of people will come to me within a short space of time with wisdom teeth issues and similar kind of concerns going on in their life. And they might be really different ages, but it's like this I wrote about in the book. This is why I developed this theory that wisdom teeth are really about kind of the maturing life stages or initiations into different stages of adult life, and the sense of progression on a soul level is reflected in those wisdom teeth. So,
and I found that fascinating because when I went through my wisdom teeth debacle, I only had 3 wisdom teeth. I was actually missing the one that you have labeled as the mystic. Right. And I noticed, and having now gone through a spiritual awakening and going into my 40s, I'm like, maybe it'll appear now, because you did mention in the book that the wisdom teeth can bud over a period of years. Sometimes it could appear later in life, potentially. So I was like, oh, I wonder if this is going to show up now that I've gone through this like spiritual initiation, because that was missing at that time.
Right. Or you may not have ever developed the tooth bud for that, because, I never got the 4th. I can't remember now because it was all so long ago when I had the 3 that I did have extracted, but I only had 3 to be extracted. The other one just never even budded. And so my theory about that is as so much of the information and wisdom that's available in the world is readily available. We can find it in books, we can find it on the internet, we've got access to so much more information that we don't necessarily need to have it within us.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And it's, just when we look at the evolutionary process, even just as the mouth, the jaw, the shape of the teeth have evolved over time, it would make perfect sense. That's a brilliant theory in terms of how that would almost evolve out of the mouth. Hopefully we kind of do a little bit of a backpedal on that, and that people start seeking information a little bit more. And I know you referenced something and it might have been related to that, about how it's also related to the oral tradition, that we don't tell stories anymore to pass information, that we are so reliant on devices and technology and outsourcing information that that's also kind of affecting the evolution of the mouth. With the archetypes, is there any particular part of the mouth that you would have people concentrate on, perhaps, when it comes to the archetypes more than in one area? Should they be looking at their molars? Should they be looking at the front of their mouth? Upper, lower, right, left?
Well, it absolutely depends on what your body is asking for. So what I would encourage everyone to do is to pay attention and listen to the sensations in your mouth. Now, if you've reached the point of having symptoms that you need dental work for, then it's really obvious which tooth, which archetype needs your attention. But if you want to avoid having symptoms, you pay attention while it's not causing problems, then you can pick up, a little kind of buzz of sensitivity, or a little drop of blood when you're flossing, or a rough feeling on a particular tooth where there's a bigger buildup of calcifying biofilms that we call plaque and tartar. But it's going to be different for everyone, and it's that self-awareness. Like, I love that as you're reading the book, you were looking and touching and feeling and sensing into your teeth. My dream is that everyone should be doing that, and the ideal time is that, most people brush their teeth once or twice a day. There's a couple minutes a day where you're already like focused on your teeth. If you use that as kind of a meditation time and tune into, what are my teeth telling me? Which teeth are like really feeling the toothbrush more? What am I noticing? What thoughts and emotions, memories, ideas come into my mind as I'm focused on my teeth? Then that's the direction to follow. The worst thing in the world would be for me to say, oh, everyone should look at their molars. That's ridiculous, because it's going to be your unique story. I mean, I do see a lot more adults with problems in their molars as a rule. And that's because the molars are, I call them the adulting teeth. They really will get activated by the issues of adult life, of work and career and family and home and parenting children and struggles with money and status and things like that. They're the issues that really activate those teeth. And it's a lot less common to see people who have issues in their canines. It's probably the least common tooth to get a problem. That's the most common tooth to get gum recession. And the canines are all about power dynamics and power relationships and imbalances and so on. And so, I think the issue of gum recession on that power point in our mouths is really important to look at, because of the way that modern society and sort of the global consumerist approach to life that we're all stuck in, or most of us are stuck in, really undermines a sense of being supported. We have to be so independent, and there's this really strong power imbalance between the haves and the have-nots, the 1% and the rest of us. And so I think that means that the gums are a lot more vulnerable. And there's physical reasons why the gums over the canines are vulnerable as well, because it's on the kind of the corner of your mouth. And so it's more likely to get caught when you're toothbrushing. You need to be really careful when you're brushing those canine teeth. But, both of those things are true, the physical and the metaphysical, and it's the accumulation of factors, physical and metaphysical, that is what can lead to symptoms developing.
That's really interesting that you were just bringing up the power dynamics, because we have just come through a very disempowering time in history. And we're coming into a time energetically where people are stepping into their power and they're finding a new sense of self and inner truth. And there's this rebalancing of power that's beginning to happen. So with the gum recession, is that something that's coming up a lot for you lately with your clients? Is it something that you've been doing more of lately?
Yeah, I do a lot of work with gums. So even though I'm the tooth fairy, it's probably 50% of my clients come to me with gum issues. When I started doing this work, I didn't particularly have gum issues myself, and I hadn't researched the alternatives as deeply as I had the tooth stuff. But what I have found is that the assumptions that gums cannot regrow once they've started receding just doesn't seem to be true. Amazingly, quite a few of my clients, not all, but a considerable proportion, have been able to start regenerating gum tissue. And that's something that if you look in any kind of mainstream, if you ask your dentist or your periodontist, they'll say, no, it's not possible. And yet, when my clients go to their dentist or their periodontist and show them, open their mouth to have their gums measured, they've grown.
Well, I'm a firm believer that the body is always in a state of healing. It's just whether or not it's being given the environment and the support to do so. We're either inhibiting the healing and preventing it, or we are assisting it. So, I mean, that doesn't sound crazy to me at all that you could regrow the tissue, but that's phenomenal to know, because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. It becomes incredibly costly as well when you have to start looking at getting into frequent dental visits, getting into specialists. Sometimes people just don't have the funds to be able to do that on an ongoing basis. So being empowered to know, to be able to work with you for the cost of what it would be to have these invasive dental procedures, but also be empowered with the knowledge to be able to move forward and care for yourself in a way that not only can have like a generational impact, but carry you through the duration of your life. That's almost invaluable.
That's my goal, is to give people the tools to keep their teeth and gums healthy and stable for the rest of their lives. So you might work with me for a few months, but you'll have a toolkit at the end of that. And then you can share that with your family. And, I see a lot of mothers who come to me because their own teeth or gums are in trouble, but they want to know how they can help their children avoid problems. And, a lot of the tools are transferable. So once they know, they've got the knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just not a lot of it on the market. And, God bless the dentists. We're not saying that dental intervention isn't necessary, because sometimes we need it. And I think what you offer is a beautiful balance of like the science and the allopathic and the Western medicine, but also bringing in this holistic aspect, which really is self-responsibility and accountability, is what you're really getting people to get familiar with, is how to truly take care of ourselves first so that we don't need the interventions, but it's good to know that they're there when we need them. Have you had the ability to work with any dentists, or have they been finding your work, and has it been impacting dental practices?
Yeah, a few. I mean, not many. I'm not a dentist, and so I don't have any authority in that space. Every year, a couple of dental professionals find me and do some work with me. And I'm hoping this book makes it a lot easier for them to access this information. Even though I didn't write it specifically for dentists, I think it would be incredibly valuable reading for any dentist to improve their ability to communicate with their patients, particularly people who show up with the question, why is this happening to me? I've done all the right things. I do all the brushing and the flossing, and I eat really healthy. So why do I have cavities? Why do I have a loose tooth, or my gums receding, or whatever? And the dentist can say, well, yeah, you did all the right stuff physically, and well done, but there's this other possibility. Does this resonate with you? And to pull out the archetype and say, well, this is the meaning of that tooth. How does that fit into your story? And that's all they need, is just to share that information with the client. The client can then go off and, the patient, it's patients for dentists, go off and work with that. I'm not saying that dental surgeons need to become like therapists and sit by the chair and talk away, but, I would certainly rather be lying in a dental chair listening to the dentist tell me a story about the tooth archetype that they're working on, than telling me, as I have had a dentist done, how I was helping to pay for their Tahitian family holiday, which I found very upsetting.
Yeah, that's not okay. And it's interesting because with that information in their hands, and when you consider the volume of patients that they would have throughout the run of a day, the patterns should become very apparent very quickly. And it would become kind of this self-fulfilling book for them, because they, at one point, it would become undeniable, the patterns that you would start seeing throughout the day.
Yeah. And I think that's what happened for these European dentists whose work that I was able to access, is that, just through decades of clinical practice and a curious mind, a willingness to look at it from a different perspective than, mainstream allopathic scientific proof approach, but to have a more esoteric approach. They saw these patterns and, couldn't deny it. It's so curious to me that it's all these European dentists that are able to have that perspective, whereas English-speaking countries doesn't seem to produce dentists who are willing, or at least willing to talk about observing these patterns. Who knows what they're actually observing? But
no, absolutely. And something else that kept coming up for me as I was reading the book is if I was a dental professional and I was working inside of patients' mouths day in and day out, and now understanding that it's deeply connected to the energy body, and I'm maybe having thoughts or feelings that don't make sense to me, or I'm feeling physical ailments and I don't understand why. When we look at kind of the burnout rate within the dental profession and the various mental health issues that come up around anxiety and depression, most body workers, people who work more in the spiritual realm, who understand energy, they know how to kind of cleanse themselves after they sit with a client. Dentists are not aware of this, but just the pure energy transfer through not only the meridians of the body, but also any trauma that someone's coming in with, and taking it from patient to patient as well, and also absorbing it. So that's what I was seeing and hearing as I was reading your book, was like, oh my gosh, how different could a dental clinic be if a dentist understood the energetic body and how to properly kind of cleanse their aura, if you will, to understand what they're absorbing and how to not absorb it.
And what a difference that could make if they were doing that to the level of trauma that gets triggered for people in the chair.
100%.
Because there's so many people who experience dental trauma in a dental chair, and that was certainly a big part of my story. But so much of it is unnecessary. Yes, it's painful and it's often devastating if you have to lose a tooth or have a root canal or some major piece of work that you don't want to have. But it could be done in this context of like empowerment and healing and transformational. A dental procedure like a root canal or a tooth extraction can be a portal where you step through into another stage of your spiritual development. And that's the work that I do with my clients when they need to have a piece of dental work like that. And often they do, because people generally don't come and see me until there's quite serious problems in their teeth. So we're not able to prevent, every dental procedure. So my intention is always to help people have the best possible experience with a necessary dental procedure. And a lot of times that means letting go of childhood trauma, sexual abuse or family violence or ancestral trauma, like having been, through wars or famines or forced migration. All of those things can be sitting in the tooth that has been crying out for help. When you're conscious of that energetic relationship, you're able to go into that dental experience and use it as this portal for healing and transformation, not just for yourself, but for your ancestors and your descendants. So what a dream if dentists were on board with that perspective to their work.
Oh my gosh. I just think of myself as a child and having all of my baby teeth, my milk teeth, had to be extracted. Yeah, I did. I do not recall losing any of my teeth on my own. And then I was told that my teeth were too large for my gums. So I've had multiple adult teeth extracted as well. And it was incredibly traumatic. And then the wisdom teeth debacle. So I try and avoid a dental chair at all costs, because it's just not something that I really want to go through. And having this more holistic approach to my own healthcare, I don't feel seen or heard in those spaces. So it's not a situation that I really want to put myself in, even in the quote holistic dentistry sphere. I don't see what I would consider like my ideal dental clinic existing yet, which is where you may have some body practitioners in there. You have people that can work on the stress and work on the trauma, and they're working in tandem with a dental team. It's almost like a dental spa instead. And yeah, it becomes more of this full body healing experience. But I feel that way about all healthcare, that, when we start to segment and really chop up the body, that we're doing ourselves a huge disservice. But
yeah, that's, I think, my ultimate dream is to be part of a movement to transform the dental profession so that they aren't caught up in this kind of trauma cycle, which, no one goes into dentistry because they want to cause trauma to other people.
no, not at all. And I think, we're in the age of Aquarius. This is like the perfect time to really innovate and step outside of the box and start to question the limitations that sit inside of licensing, and look at the limitations inside of the insurance models, and then really start to look at the clients who are willing to make the investment outside of those parameters, because their mental, emotional, and physical well-being is more important than an insurance rebate. And there's so many opportunities. That's why I was so grateful to find you and the work that you're doing, because I hope someone, a dentist, anyone is listening to this particular episode and goes, I really need to speak with her, because what I'm doing right now is not working for me. And maybe there's a better way.
Yeah. And I am seeing that with the book's only been out a month, but I've had a couple of conversations with dental professionals where I see them, eagerly reaching for what's possible, in terms of incorporating the information that I'm delivering into their model as best they can. And so, if that's just the first month, then I think as momentum develops, and I really want to encourage anyone to, like, when you buy the book, buy two and give one to your dentist. Take one along to your dental visit and hand it over and say, I'd love you to, just open up to the page that's about the archetype for the tooth that you're working on for me. So at least we're on the same page. We can have a conversation about that. And then maybe they'll read the rest of the book and take it from there.
Yeah, well, even when I was reading the book, and I know you encourage people to do it, is to reach out and get a copy of your dental records. Because as someone who has had so many teeth pulled, I'm counting, but I don't know which tooth I'm actually counting. So it would be really helpful for me to be able to sit down and have this conversation with my dentist or my hygienist or whoever I'm speaking to, and be on the same page, and not have them look at me like just very woo-woo. But it's and that's why I appreciate the way that you've articulated and written the book, because it is very accessible, I believe, to a medical professional. It doesn't feel so far out in left spiritual field that it's not plausible for what you're writing about to be true.
Well, what I tried to do is really set the scene to talk about what are the physical mechanisms for emotions to affect teeth, and it's mostly through the hormonal system. So we have experiences, we have emotional responses to those experiences, and those emotional responses release hormones, and those hormones do things like cortisol, the stress hormone, actually inhibits the flow of blood and dental fluid into the teeth and gums. You'll notice it because your mouth will dry up with saliva quite often when you're feeling like a big whoosh of cortisol induced stress, or stress induced cortisol whoosh. Goes both ways. But it also interferes with your gut's ability to absorb and utilize the nutrients, the particular nutrients that your teeth and gums need to be healthy. And it tightens the muscles in your jaw, and that puts pressure on the teeth. You end up clenching and grinding, and that causes problems with teeth enamel and with the gums and the stability of the tooth and the socket and so on. And so there's all these physical mechanisms. So it's not a matter of, oh, this is woo-woo and this is science. It's like there are physical mechanisms for the energetic stuff to be happening on, and you don't just have to have blind faith to follow this.
Absolutely. And I know you say multiple times in the book, like your symptoms are just messengers. So how do you start to read the messages instead of ignore them? And it's, when I was going through my burnout journey, it's like, well, you can learn through a metaphor or a 2x4. So you either can hear something and you resonate with it, or it's going to whack you over the head one day if you keep ignoring it. And that is something that you do speak a lot about in the book is, pay attention. As you were saying earlier, it's that presence. Pay attention to what's happening in your mouth so that it doesn't get to the point that you're in an emergent situation and at the mercy of an intensive intervention.
And the last thing you want is a emergency intensive intervention. If you have to have a tooth pulled or a root canal, you don't want that in an emergency dental context. You want time to prepare. You want a dentist you really trust. You want to be able to negotiate about the materials and the procedures. All of that's really important for that procedure to go very well. Not to mention being able to use it as that portal for spiritual healing and transformation. If you're like in a crisis and have to go for an emergency dental procedure, like I did when I was 17 and I was homeless, I was sleeping on someone's couch and I woke up in the middle of the night in absolute agony, couldn't work out what was wrong. One of the people in the house, forget it was probably dental, and took me to the dental school where they had an emergency clinic. And with no warning, no understanding what was going on, in the middle of a huge teaching hospital, I'm laid down in this chair, and the shame of that experience of having, drilling into the tooth, and it was so decayed, the smell came out. I was so ashamed that like dozens of people in this room could smell my rotten tooth as they were working on it. That's my most vivid memory besides the pain of that experience. It was not a healing experience.
No, and you're bringing up a great point too, because people do carry a lot of shame about their teeth, and you do talk about that in the archetypes, and you talk about that as you're kind of mapping through the teeth, and specifically in the front-facing teeth, what we show and present to society. I'm one of those people. I have some relatively crooked teeth, and I've always been incredibly self-conscious about them, but I always refused orthodontic care. I never wanted braces. And I think it's because I grew up around many people that for them, when they were getting braces, their teeth were being tilted so extreme in order to correct a bite, or even worse, they were having their jaw broken in order to have a realignment done. And this was happening when I was in high school, and that is all I'm seeing. And I'm like, no, I don't want that. So I've always kind of pushed it away, but then I've always been carrying and I don't know why, but like this shame, because we're presented this beautiful photoshopped world of teeth that are just it's not achievable. It's not normal to have Zoom white teeth and have them be perfectly straight. It's just not realistic, but that's where we are right now in society, unfortunately. And it's part of the other body dysmorphia that we have. But there is a lot around the mouth and around the teeth.
Yeah. I mean, people will have so much shame about some slight crookedness or a little bit of discoloration or something that they'll go in and they will do permanent, irreversible damage to healthy, functional teeth for a tiny imperfection that no one would notice unless you were, your teeth were blown up to 3 feet tall on a billboard or a giant movie screen. And, it's heartbreaking because those veneers, just so damaging to teeth that you can never not have again, they don't last your whole life. You're going to have them replaced. they cause so much problems. And the more times you have them replaced, the more at risk you are of nerve pain and, actually losing your whole teeth, losing your jawbone density. Don't get me started on the stomach.
I the veneer, for a hot minute, I was like, do I want to do that? And I'm like, Nicole, no, you don't. You don't want to do that. They have to grind down. There's like a nub of a tooth left. Why would you do that if something goes wrong down the road and you're too young for that? Like what happens when that tooth fails? And it's really interesting. And even just thinking back to kind of like grandparents where it was like, okay, you have an issue with your teeth. We're going to pull them all out. And now we're going to do false teeth, which there's almost like an entire generation of elderly who do not even have a single tooth in their mouth. And I'm just thinking of the trauma that would induce over the years and how those plates fitting on the gums would affect the meridian system of the mouth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. My grandfather was a dentist, and he was in the military in World War II, and he was in a hospital ship off the shore at the landing at Normandy, and his job was to, the infantrymen who in America who joined up from like poor farm boys from the Midwest who'd never seen a dentist in their lives, very poor diet, and so on. Before they got sent out to the battlefield, my grandpa's job was to just pull out any teeth that might cause a toothache on the battlefield. And so these poor soldiers, the night before they go into battle, have just had, a tooth or 3 or 5 extracted. Can you imagine going from that trauma into the battlefield trauma? No wonder that generation of men are like so emotionally suppressed and shut down. And yeah.
That's a really interesting legacy that you have.
Yeah.
That's incredibly interesting. So
that's my next book. It's about dentistry.
Yeah. To have that in your ancestry, and then to now almost be, I don't want to say course correcting, but kind of course correcting and taking a completely different approach to the profession. That's I find that fascinating, actually.
Yeah, I feel like my grandpa Lou is kind of watching over me, from the beginning of my holistic tooth fairy journey. I felt him as a presence, helping me have that, like, not to tip fully into the woo-woo, but to have that scientific basis and that grounding in reality and practicality, and not to be anti-dentist, but to support people to have a positive and empowering relationship with their dentist and experience in the dental chair. Because, I loved him, and how could I be anti-dentist? Because that would mean, yeah.
No, and I think that's really important in a world that seems to swing between extremes right now. We do need to find this place of neutrality, but we can only find that place of neutrality when we first start taking radical self-accountability and responsibility for ourselves first. And only once we do that can we stop pointing the fingers at other people and waiting for them to come in and save us and fix us. Which again is why I love your book and the way you wrote it, and why I was just so enamored by it. I was laying in a hammock the other day, like reading the book, and I'm like touching my teeth, and I'm like, this is fascinating, because in the early chapters, you're basically walking people through, like, run your tongue on the roof of your mouth, touch the back of your teeth, like, get familiar. What does your mouth taste like? And I'm like, what do you mean? What does my mouth taste like? I never thought about that before. So this just whole other level of awareness was unlocked, and it was beautiful, because there's not a lot of things that do that for me that quickly when I pick up a book. And it was definitely, I was hooked very early on, reading it, and I'm sharing it with everyone that I know. And clearly it's going to be posted in the show notes for this episode. But also, I have to give you your roses, because when I found you, I found your website first, and you have so much information on your website to get people started. I was incredibly impressed with just what's there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a really great place to start in order to kind of understand what it is that you do, get an introduction to what is kind of like holistic oral care, and start understanding the function of the mouth. But then you're getting into like living teeth need living food. And I'm like, I never thought of that. And it really is like an eye-opening experience to be on your website. So like I highly recommend that people go there first, obviously to buy your book, but even just to kind of get an introduction to exactly what it is that you do, because you do share so much very freely on your site.
Yeah. Well, I just, there's not much information out there. B, what there is often contradictory and confusing, and some of it's downright wrong. And I really wanted to create a kind of a hub of reliable resources for this niche, this little corner of the world, of the internet. That's like a little beacon of of truth and hope and non-judgmental welcome, because I think it's really easy to feel, like we were saying before, to feel ashamed when things go wrong with your teeth, like very individualistic blame that we get from the dentist and that we get from the wider society, and that is implicit in the unrealistic pictures we have of perfect teeth on, models and movie stars and so on. Rich people basically get to have the perfect teeth. And I really wanted to create something that was for the rest of us, that gave some basic, easily accessible practices and tools that anyone could start to use immediately without having to spend a cent anywhere on me or on any products, and to cut through the bullshit that's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I was trying to think of like how I actually found you, and I think I was Googling like the spiritual meaning of wisdom teeth. And I think that's like your SEO is on point, because I think that's how I found you. Is I was looking for the spiritual meaning of wisdom teeth. I've really been looking at the trauma that started I shouldn't even say started, was unlocked during that procedure, because it was clearly caused by something else, because I had an entire team of infectious disease professionals. I had OMF team. No one could figure it out. And then after I finally left the hospital, my mouth had atrophied shut pretty much. I could only get my fingernail between my teeth. And I had physio and acupuncturists and other oral surgeon. I had one oral surgeon hand me a stack of tongue depressors and just told me to like wedge them between my teeth and every day add another one and do it multiple times a day to try and like shim my mouth open essentially. And nothing was working. And then I met this chiropractor that worked on the central nervous system. And within 2 weeks, she ended up having my mouth open, and she was working strictly on the emotional body. And it blew my mind. But then it's like it was the beginning of a spiritual awakening where I was starting to have this mind body connection. We took a little nap and I went back to sleep for a little while until I had another health crisis. And then I'm like, whoa. So I think that's also what's beautiful about this information when they go to your website is you will see glimpses of yourself in there. And even if it doesn't click right away, you can't unsee something once you've seen it. And it might not click now, but next time something happens, you might be like, oh, I wonder. And then you allow your curiosity to bring you back to the information. And then maybe at that time, you're ready to go a little bit deeper, because it is like an unlayering process. And as you've said in the book, you've been doing this work for years, but you still are constantly learning. Something is always being unlayered.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a endlessly fascinating journey. And, I have figured out a lot of stuff, but I absolutely wouldn't pretend that I know it all. I think I know more than most people on this topic. And so I felt a duty to share. But yeah, always learning. And from, everyone who shows up and that I get to talk to, I learn from, always learning.
And that's beautiful. And that type of humility is so important when looking for a coach as well. Because you don't want to go to someone who has necessarily all of the answers, but you want to have someone who's going to sit there with you and help you walk through the issue that you're potentially having at that moment. Because I think most coaches and healers understand that they're not healing you, they're helping you heal yourself. And I know that you know that. I get that from you, and from the work that you do. And it's so important right now, especially as you touched on that the teeth do kind of fall into a bit of a class system. And we are seeing huge divides right now, in income disparity and people's ability to access healthcare. And this is why it is so important for people to take responsibility and accountability over their own health. And we cannot forget the mouth in that process.
Because we didn't even talk about how what happens in your mouth affects the whole rest of your body. But there's all kinds of diseases of the body, from heart disease to diabetes to Alzheimer's to, issues with fertility and so on, that can be traced back to the diseases of the mouth, and the treatments of the diseases of the mouth can cause problems in the rest of the body as well. So, yeah, can't forget the mouth.
You cannot forget the mouth. I mean, it's one of the first things that women are told they have to pay attention to when they're pregnant, is to pay attention to your gum health. And I was just having a conversation the other day about the metal amalgams, and we can't overlook that when we're looking at neurological disorders right now and the prevalence of various issues that the aging and the seniors have, the ones who have a mouthful of mercury fillings. We can't look at the motor neurological issues that have come up.
Yeah. Oh, we could have a whole nother conversation.
We absolutely could, and maybe we will someday. What's next for the Holistic Tooth Fairy?
Well, I'm started writing another book called The Empowered Dental Patient that is really focused on the going to the dentist and having a good experience and a good outcome, feeling confident. I'm also working on some little side projects around the secret lives of teeth to kind of add more depth and richness to that experience of reading. So, there might be some interesting, I don't know what to call them, products isn't the right word, publications around those themes and sort of giving easier access to the archetypes coming up soon. So, check out my website, holistictoothfairy.com. Sign up for my Holistic Tooth Fairy Circle email newsletter, which I send out every couple of weeks, and you'll always find links to whatever I'm doing at the time, and I do give a lot of kind of free resource. And then you'll know when the new publications start to appear.
Excellent. And if anyone wants to work with you, you do one-on-one coaching, and all of that information's on the website as well.
Yeah, and I work with people exclusively online, so it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Even though I'm in New Zealand, we can find a time and meet on Zoom, and I will support you to heal your own teeth and gums problems. So I believe that you can. I believe you can regrow your gums. I believe you can remineralize your teeth. I believe that you can have a transformative experience with a necessary dental procedure if one is needed. And I will be honored to support you on that journey.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on to the Grand Rising Experience. It's been such a pleasure to meet you. And again, I cannot recommend your book more than I already have, The Secret Lives of Teeth, which is available on your website. It's available on Amazon. I think everyone should have it. Like you said, buy 2 copies, give one to your dentist, give them to your friends. It's such a beautiful piece of literature that I think every household needs in their medicine cabinet.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight. This is one of the best conversations I've had yet about the book. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's my hope that what you just witnessed was the first of many conversations that I will have the opportunity to have with Meliors, because we really did just scratch the surface of holistic oral care. And it is something that I do believe, because of my own personal experience, that we really do need to take full accountability and responsibility over for ourselves. And what I admire most about her approach is that she truly embodies the knowledge and the wisdom of what it means to be both the student and the teacher, that she is in a constant exploration for more knowledge and allowing her curiosity to guide and inform her next decisions, while also not throwing the baby out with the bathwater and holding a certain reverence and respect for those in the medical field that we do need when sometimes we didn't listen to our instincts and our intuition and care for ourselves in the ways that we needed to. Again, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Grand Rising Experience wherever you are listening. You can head on over to grandrisingexperience.substack.com and join the conversation in the comments below this episode. If you have any questions for Meliors, I will ensure that she receives them. Again, thank you so much for being here. Until next time, I love you.